Hey everybody, today I'm doing something completely different and talking about 10 board games that are perfect to start a collection with. So my thought process while kind of coming up with this list was that these games needed to have some degree of replayability to them, depth and some layers to unravel as you go through, but despite that still needed to be engaging from the first play. They need to be readily available and not overly expensive. They need to have a breadth of mechanisms and different player counts that they can cater for. So you've got a ton of different ideas and concepts in board games that all these games, contain, as well as suiting all those different player counts from 2 players all the way up to that 5 or 6 player count. And these are always games that, in my personal opinion, have been home runs with who I've played them with. So they're reliable games that I'm pretty sure that most people will enjoy. But before I get started on the list, I want to give a shout out to the show's sponsor, KIENDA.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer here in the UK. And if you use my link in the show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. But let's get started on the list. Okay, so I'm going to start the list by talking about a couple of 2-player-only games. So 2-player-only games I think are quite an important cornerstone of a collection, because inevitably there's going to be times when it's just you and another person, and you want something that's tailor-made for that player count, because a lot of the time in bigger games, when you are only playing at 2 players, something is lost, where in these games that is certainly not the case. The first game I'm talking about is 7 Wonders Duel, which is a fantastic example of a drafting game. So in this game, you're going to lay out a bunch of cards in this pyramid formation. Now the cards at the extremities of this pyramid are ones that you can draft into your personal collection of cards, which will be collecting things such as resources, which will allow you to buy better and better buildings as you go on. There might be military cards, which will let you compete in this kind of tug of war mechanism in the game as you're trying to pull this marker towards or push it towards your opponent. And if you invade them, that's going to be an automatic victory. You've got to try and collect these science symbols, because if you collect them all, then you're going to automatically win the game. So there's tons of different kind of paths to victory here. All of them are viable, and I love the consequences to your actions here, because not only have you got to think about what's good for you, but you've got to think about not leaving opportunities for your opponent to take and to capitalize on. And sometimes those decisions can be absolutely agonizing. But for a 30-minute game, the depth to decision ratio here and the time it takes is just fantastic. So I could not recommend this game enough. That is 7 Wonders Duel. The second of the 2-player only games I want to recommend is Mandala. So Mandala has a more breezy feel to it. However, there is depth here and layers to unravel. This game feels like a more traditional card game, but there's some degree of timeless elegance to it as you are playing these cards from your hand onto these 2 different mandalas. And when you're playing these cards, they come in different colours, and you can use these cards in 2 different ways, basically. You can put them up for grabs by putting them in the middle of these mandalas, which will not only put them up for offer, but they'll also let you replenish your hand of cards, or you can use these cards to bid for the cards in the middle. Now, what I love about this game is that when all the colours of the game are introduced to one of the mandalas, that is going to stop, and then you're going to calculate who's bid the most, and then you're going to take the cards from the middle and put them in your scoring areas. But what I love about this game is the fact that the order in which you collect these cards is important. Like, for example, the first colour you collect is only worth 1 point. The second type of card you collect are worth 2 points each, and so on. Now, what this means is that throughout the game, because you are collecting things at different tempos, they're going to be worth different things to each player. So, for example, the yellow cards might be worth nothing to me, but they might be worth a fortune to my opponent. So therefore, I need to use that information quite calculated, or in a calculated manner, to stop them from gaining those yellow cards. And it's just a wonderful, breezy experience. You could play this time and time again for years on end, and I don't think it's ever going to really age, because there's some elegant class and timelessness to this game, and just a degree of magic that I can't quite put my finger on, but could not recommend this game enough, and I'm sure it will capture your imagination. So that is Mandala. Now, keeping on the theme of card games, I think it's really important to have a clever card game in your collection, one that introduces hand management and more crunchy and strenuous decisions. And the game I wanted to recommend for this category is Capital Lux 2 Generations. So this actually has some familiarity to a game like Blackjack, which is a game we're all familiar with, that push your luck mechanism where you want to get as close as 21 as you can by drawing cards from the stack. This one takes it to a whole new dimension though, as you are managing this hand of cards which come in different colours, so you're basically playing like 4 different games of blackjack at once, but the target that you're aiming towards changes depending on what people play into the center of the table. But the twist is that whenever you play a card into the middle, then you are going to get a special ability. And this game also comes with 4 different game modes, and they all feel vastly different without being complicated, without being overwrought, to add tons of replayability in this game. And there's just amazing interaction here. It's very dynamic, things are always shifting, you always feel like you're on the edge of your seat, and when you pull off the perfect moves and things work out in your favour, it just feels so satisfying. So a game that's never ceases to impress me. I've played this a ton, I've not even slightly tired of it, always learning new things about it, playing the new different game modes again, you're always just unravelling new depth to the game. And the fact that it manages to stay simple with a clean core system, I could not praise this game enough. And I think if you love your card games, this is the one to get. The next game that I'd highly recommend you pick up to start your collection with is Las Vegas Royale. So there are a number of different categories that this game would fit into. It is an area majority game, it's a dice driven game, who doesn't like rolling a big bunch of dice, and it also has that high energy, gambling, hustle and bustle feel that you'd get from a Las Vegas themed game. So in this game, you are going to be rolling a big bunch of dice, and then you're going to be picking one of the pit values of those dice, so for example all the 5s, then allocating it to the 5 casino. And at the end of the game, or end of the round, when everybody has depleted all their dice, whoever's got the most in each casino are going to pick up the biggest amount of money. Who's got the second most is going to pick up the second amount of money. Now, very simple stuff. However, there are just little things added on here that make it interesting and up the ante. So, for example, if I had, say, 4 dice of value 4 in the 4 area, and so did my opponent, then they're actually going to cancel each other out, and then it would go to the next player below it. So you need to be an outright winner here, which is always in flux. You always want to be making sure you're adjusting and prioritizing things, knowing when to dedicate your dice and when to sit back and when to commit and when not to commit. And on top of that, each of these casinos, if you want to, you can only do half the board if you want to, you can add in these awesome mini games. So whenever you dedicate a dice to a certain casino, you get this additional option to play things such as, if you roll a double, you get a jackpot, or you can do things such as putting these blocker pieces on the other parts of the board. So there's modularity here where each game can feel different, and you can pick and choose which ones you want. You can do the simpler ones if you're introducing this to new players, or you can do the more complex and even nastier ones if you want to play a really high conflict style game. But yeah, simple mechanically, great decisions, great fun, and a game that I've never had a bad experience with. So that is Las Vegas Royale. I also think it's really important for every collection to have a fantastic and versatile filler game. So these are games that are nice and quick to set up, get played, and pack away again. Now the game I put into this category is Coloretto. So Coloretto is a fantastic little card-driven push your luck and set collection game where all you're doing is drawing cards from the stack, putting them in columns, or you can take a column of cards, and with the idea of collecting 3 different colours of these chameleons, because they're going to score you points based on a sliding scale. So the more you collect, the bigger the increments jump up in terms of the points you get from those sets. But the twist on this game is that if you start collecting any more than 3 types of chameleons, then one of those chameleons is going to start causing you negative points based on the same scoring system. So the more you get, the more points you're going to lose. And what that means is you have this really cool, kind of crunchy, innate decision to make where, am I going to push my luck and try to get a better deal out of this column? Or is somebody going to sabotage it for me and put a chameleon that I don't want in that column? Or, am I going to be content with what's already there, play it safe, and add to my chameleons I already have locked in? So I love that. It's so simple to explain, but it's just great. It's a versatile game that scales beautifully depending on the player count. This works great at 2 players, it works great at 3, 4, and 5, and is always quick and concise and just guaranteed fun. So yeah, highly recommend Coloretto. The next game that I'd highly recommend as a starting point for your collection is Cascadia. So Cascadia is going to scratch a lot of itches when it comes to gaming. It's going to be a puzzly style game. It's going to give you tile placement and also a cool degree of drafting where you're not only drafting one thing in isolation, you're actually drafting a pair of things together. Now in this game you're going to be collecting these tiles and building up a map of different terrain types, trying to create the biggest surface area of each type by efficiently maneuvering these tiles. But also you're trying to place these tokens on top of those tiles to build patterns based on these scoring cards. So all these cards are going to associate to a different animal. Like for example, you might want all the foxes to be surrounded by other different types of animals, or you want the bears to be in little groups of 2s or 3s, or you want the fish to be in a big row or a big chain. And mapping all that efficiently and trying to build these patterns out to score as many points as you can is such a satisfying little puzzle that I really can't get enough of. Actually, this game really did blow up over the last couple of years. Really reached that level of popularity that's just accessible and caters to all different types of gamers. Because if you're brand new to the hobby, you're still going to be able to play this, and it depends on how, depending on how good you are and efficient you are at placing these things out. But if you've played, millions of board games and you want to come back and play this, you're still going to have a good time because you have to work with what you have. So I love that degree of, just being invested in what you're doing right now, and it's not really going to get too boring because you're always trying to optimize your current options. But a lovely game, it looks beautiful, lovely theme and setting, and I think it's just going to invite a lot of people. And it's going to be, always going to be a pleasure to introduce this one to new players. So that is Cascadia. My next recommendation is something completely different. This is an economic negotiation and just a high energy game called Chinatown. So in Chinatown, you're trying to gain as much money as you can by placing buildings on the board, connecting them together, gaining ownership of different companies, and then generating an income. But what I love about this game is that everything is up for negotiation. So you can strike deals of all different types of the different players, all trying to, almost kind of to pull the wool over people's eyes to try and get the best from it. So you can trade the different building types, you can trade ownership of the buildings, you can trade cash, you can do any of the above together. And it all is just such a free-flowing, dynamic game that is all based on the interaction with the player. So I love how social and dynamic this game is, how creative you can be with striking up deals. If you have players who are more outgoing and like this style of gameplay without having a complex or fiddly game to get in the way, then Chinatown is just a perfect example of what you might be looking for. So the gameplay itself is just outstanding, but the fact that the gameplay is strong enough on its own to just sit back and think, these are a simple set of rules, but it's up to you what you want to do with it. I've introduced this to brand new gamers and they've had a great time. I've introduced this to very seasoned, experienced gamers and they've also had a great time. So this is one of my favourite games of all time. Could not recommend this one enough. You are probably looking at that 4 or 5 player count to get the most from it, but it still works pretty well at 3. But if you want a more boisterous game, a more creative game, and something that's going to just really up the ante in terms of energy levels, then Chinatown is going to be a big hit for your gaming group, I guarantee it. I think it's very important for every board gamer to have at least one party game in their collection, something they can bring out at all occasions to teach to a wide variety of different people, ranging from young children to elderly, relatives and everything in between. And my choice for this category is Just One. So Just One is a cooperative word association game where you are simply going to draw a card without looking at it and show all the other players. Now, all the other players are then going to write a 1-word clue on these dry erase boards, and then they're going to show each other, and if there's ever any duplicates on those boards, they're going to get wiped off, and therefore they're not going to be shown to the clue giver. And of course, the more duplicates, it means that the less information that the clue giver is going to give, or going to get, and they're not going to have the best chance of guessing what the word is. So what this means is that everybody needs to be a bit creative when creating their clues, but they also need to kind of second guess what people are going to do, because you want at least one person writing the obvious word, but if more than one people are thinking that, then they're both going to write it. And you often find that everyone is so obscure with their clues, then they're actually not going to help the clue giver at all when nobody has written the obvious answer. So just a very simple mechanism there. One of those games that you think, why hasn't this been designed before? It feels familiar. Everybody is going to get it from the get-go, and it's just a game that you can just, just get the game going straight away, and everybody's going to be singing from the same hymn sheet and understand what's going on. A fantastic party game that's, again, so accessible and just a brilliant game. So that is Just One. And my last couple of games are going to fit into the more strategy side of things. You want something with a bit more meat on its bones. Most of the ones I've talked about so far are on the simpler end of the scale. Now, I'm not saying these games are going to be complex, but they do have many layers of strategy to them. They have depth and nuance to them. And the first game I'm talking about is Concordia. So Concordia, in my opinion, is one of the cleanest, one of the most elegant and beautiful games out there in terms of its gaming prowess. So this is a card-driven resource management game as you are trying to travel around this map and create these trading posts. And then you can use these areas or trigger these areas to give you resources based on where you have trading posts. But that might be helping other players as well. I love the hand management in this game as everybody is going to start the same amount of cards and they're going to let you move around the map. They're going to let you get resources or trade resources. They're going to let you establish trading posts. They're going to let you buy new cards into your hand, which will not only give you new abilities, but will also tailor towards your strategy because each of these cards have a scoring condition on them. So you need to kind of weigh up thinking, you know what, do I want this card for what it offers me in terms of endgame scoring, or do I want it for what it's going to give me during the game? And I love that decision and I love how well it's pulled off. Another game that scales remarkably well, you can play at 2 players and it works fantastically. You can play at 5 players and it works fantastically. And I believe there's even solo modes. There's a ton of different boards if you want to keep trying new maps. And it's just such a brilliant game where you need to strategize, you need to make tactical decisions to jump in places before other people do because it's going to get more and more expensive. So if you want this this resource management game with a clever degree of hand management and just everything that Eurospace offers, then Concordia ticks a lot of boxes. The rules themselves could not be simpler. Just pick a card and do what it says and then go on to the next player. But the umbrella of effects and the cascading of these actions is just huge, and you're always going to be just getting better and better at this game. And it just has a ton to explore and develop your skills in. So yeah, love this game. It is fantastic. And I understand that this list is going to be somewhat tailored towards my taste, of course, because I am more of a Euro gamer. I don't like highly conflict-driven games. But I've introduced Concordia to gamers who normally don't like Euro games, and they do like Concordia, and Eurogamers love Concordia. So it kind of has that extra reach, I think, which is going to be great for a first game in your collection. So that is Concordia. And my final recommendation to start your collection is Keyflower. So somehow Keyflower manages to take a bunch of different mechanisms that are very common in board gaming, merge them together into a very concise and clean rule set with so much to think about without being paralysing. So this is a bidding style game as you're using meeples to bid for these tiles. These tiles you'll be placing on your own little village, I suppose. And it also has a element of worker placement to it. So this is like a terminology that you'll hear when you start introducing yourself to board games. Worker placement is such a popular mechanism where you're taking something or one of your player pieces, placing it on an action space and then getting that action. And it usually means that if you go there, nobody else can, or if somebody goes there after you, they're going to have to pay more to do it. So it's all about prioritizing actions and getting the jump on your opponents. Now this game uses it to a whole different standard where your pieces are not actually assigned to you, because if you end up using the worker placement spots, people can actually acquire those tiles, add them to their tiles and get the workers on them ready to be used against you in the future. So it has this kind of economy amongst the players where you're constantly going back and forth with your meeples or your player pieces. And it's just genius how this works. And I also think this game really introduces you to mixing tactical play with strategic play as you're trying to build towards endgame scoring criteria, as well as doing well throughout the game as well. It has a spatial puzzle to it, all within a very simple set of rules with no fiddly convolutions, again, no confusion. And it's just, for me, I think this game is a masterpiece in the way it's been put together. It is so good. And just again, manages to be a hybrid of different mechanisms, and which normally would be a concern because I think a lot of games don't know when to call it quits and know when to start editing from the games. This game, despite having a lot going on, it doesn't do anything that it doesn't need to. And every game you're not going to see the same tiles. It's another game that scales remarkably well. You wouldn't think this game would work well at 2, but it does, which is a rare exception for a bidding style game. So yeah, so many boxes being ticked here, and I just know you'll love it. So that is Keyflower. So there we have it. Those are my 10 recommendations to start a board game collection with. I'm pretty confident in this list, actually. If you have these games, you're going to have a lot of mileage in your collection and it's going to keep you going for a very long time. Now this list was very difficult to make because there are so many games out there and there could have been multiple candidates for each of these categories, but despite that I think these are all good choices, not to blow my own trumpet, but yeah, I'm very happy with this list and hopefully it's useful to you guys who are starting to get into the hobby and starting to guess what's right for you and what games you should be picking up. These are all great candidates for that. So hopefully you've enjoyed the video. If you have, please be sure to hit like and subscribe to my channel and check out my other content too. But for everybody else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye bye.